Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the very last webinar of a series of webinars conducted by sorry, the International Code Council under the S9 component of the Urban Resilience Project Rajuk Part. This has been quite a long journey with you. Um, it continued for months. Uh, Quite a large number of webinars have been offered. I don't think in Bangladesh we have had such a long series of webinars um, on the topics of engineering designs, particularly useful for professionals who are involved in the building sector. So it has been a new experience for us. Uh, I I believe that it has been quite fruitful for all of us uh, because there were resource persons from the ICC and quite renowned professionals from Bangladesh and academicians. So it has been uh, quite a good experience for us, and it will be, I think, quite useful in the coming days where we will we have the commitment to uh, to create a safer environment for Dhaka, where all the buildings that will build in future will be safe for use and occupancy for different types of occupancy. So let's start today's topic is construction safety. Mostly it's about safety. Then a little bit about construction quality and demolition. Actually, this is related to part 7 of the Bangladesh National Building Code 2020, but it also involves some provisions of part 1, chapter 2, and part 5, chapter 2, and some provisions related to concrete in part 6, chapters 5 and 6, but mostly it's part 7. So outline of today's presentation is like this. We'll talk about, this is more or less in line with the way it is arranged in the BNBC 2020. So first we'll talk about constructional responsibilities and practices, then storage of materials, safety during construction, safety during demolition work, and a little bit about construction quality, quality control, which is evaluation and acceptance of concrete, and enforcement of these provisions. So let's start with constructional responsibilities and practices. So this is actually chapter 1 of part 7 in BNBC. So these topics are covered in this chapter of BNBC. They are planning for construction, construction control, construction management, very importantly, protection of public and workers, and environmental protection. So let's first start with planning. Everything starts with planning. So for construction, planning is probably the most important phase. So for construction, after design, before going for construction, a thorough planning is very much needed for a smooth construction. So before now, for planning, it's very important to know what are the responsibilities, and more particularly, responsibilities of different parties involved. Like there are consultants involved in the project, the owners, the contractors, And it should be very clear what are the responsibilities of which party. For what are the responsibilities of the owner, what are the responsibilities of the consultants, what are the responsibilities of the contractors, and this should be in black and white, not just understanding. It should be properly reflected in the contracts, in the contract documents, in the terms of contracts. So that is very important. If there any vagueness in the contracts, that causes problem in subsequently in the construction phase. So this is very important. A good contract can ensure good construction. So that is extremely important. So we have to be very meticulous about preparing a contract. In the planning phase, what comes first? First is safety. Safety comes first, right? And among the different issues of safety, health should come first, health of the workers. So in this, this is a very big chapter of BNBC. So I have just picked some important information, but these are not at all complete information from BNBC. These are just some few relevant information. There are many important professions that are included in this chapter. So I don't know how many of you are aware that the code requires that there should be a first aid attendant among the workers for every 100 workers who should be actually trained in first aid, how to give first aid if someone is injured. So among every 100 workers, there must be at least one person trained in first aid. And not only that, that person, it is not enough that the person is trained just once. He or she shall have a refresher course every 5 years. And it is supposed that this person is certified in this first aid. So that is the code provision, but I don't know in how many construction sites we actually practice this. I have experienced that in construction sites we have first aid boxes, but I'm not sure if there are trained personnel in giving first aid. So that is very important. Secondly, for temporary construction, there should be a detailed plan and layout, design and specification, even for all temporary constructions. And if some of the temporary constructions interfere with the right of way of utility services, then proper permissions from the respective authorities should be sought. So that is important. And in the planning process, we should think about two phases. One is pre-construction phase, another is construction phase. So before the construction phase, in the pre-construction phase, there are a lot of activities that have to be carried out in preparation for construction. Like site access should be prepared. In the top right corner, you can see a site where the ground condition is not at all suitable for proper construction to go on. So it is not desirable. A construction site, the ground should be leveled so that so vehicles and equipment can move without any obstruction or difficulty. So site preparation is very important. And Storage, we'll talk a lot about storage of different materials. Protected storage of different materials should be planned thoroughly. Like in the second picture, you can see warehouse construction materials, which is very neat and properly planned. Protection of personnel is very important. We'll talk a lot about this too. Maximization of activities during fair weather. So this is practice in our country because we have a very long rainy season. So we always try to plan our construction activities so that we can avoid the rainy season. We can do most of our activities in the dry season. So we are all familiar to this, but this is very important in the planning phase to plan accordingly. Special provisions for activities in extreme temperature. We'll talk about that too. Adequate lighting. This is very important. Many of the accidents that happen in the construction side is due to poor lighting. If the visibility is not good at the construction site, so in that case, the probability of accidents increase. So proper lighting is very, very important. And care for historically important structure, not only just historically, but in general, architecturally or archaeologically important structures. We should be very careful about those structures when the construction is nearby one. And during the construction phase, this is also in preparation of the construction phase, we have to think about what should be the organizational structure that will run the construction phase, and what will be the site layout during construction phase. Fire protection during construction is another very important topic. And in general, the construction strategy and sequence should be planned so that the whole construction phase could be completed smoothly. So we'll talk some of these issues a little bit more elaborately in the pre-construction phase. During the planning phase, a suitable construction strategy should be adopted. And when we talk about suitable construction strategy, actually a suitable construction method should be planned. An appropriate building system and appropriate materials should be planned in the design phase. And for construction, competent manpower and adequate manpower should be resourced. Similarly, proper equipment should be resourced, and for operation, proper operation techniques should be followed. So all these should be given very careful thoughts in preparing the construction strategy. And the construction strategy should also consider the local conditions like local terrain, local climate, and vulnerability for disasters if there is any for that site. Thirdly, constructability of a particular structure is very important. So during the construction phase, all the construction sequences should be planned ahead so that the structure can be, the constructability of the structure is achieved. And last but not least is the sanitation and hygiene issue. So this is mentioned repeatedly in BNBC, repeatedly, because this is very important. We have to be very, very careful about sanitation and hygiene at the construction site. Particularly now, we should be aware of in this pandemic situation, this sanitation is very, very important for the workers. So when we talk about consideration of local conditions, there are some particular instances that are mentioned in the code, like in cities. We should consider the restricted space that is available in city areas. So when planning for the construction, we have to think how will accommodate different equipment, the warehouses, storage spaces, toilet facilities, and that should be properly planned for, because there are restrictions. So there is a space is not that much available in city areas. And in city areas, in most of the cases, just beside a construction site, there are adjoining structures. So we'll talk about that too, that we have to take all the measures necessary to protect adjoining structures. This is the responsibility of the owner of the building that is going to be constructed. And in city areas, utility lines are usually underground. So while excavating, we have to be careful so that we don't damage any public utility lines, like, for example, gas lines. Quite often that causes accidents, gas explosions, etc. So we should be aware of these things in cities. And traffic restrictions, we all face every day the traffic not only restrictions, traffic congestion. So for example, if we want to use RMC, ready-mix concrete, so the ready-mix concrete comes from the factory, which is probably, for example, a little bit in the outskirt of Dhaka. So we have to think when to bring in the ready-mix concrete supply, so that there is it doesn't get set. The concrete doesn't get set. It is still in fresh condition. And in cities, we have to be careful about noise and environmental pollution. We'll also talk about these things a little bit elaborately. And another instance is the hilly regions. In hilly regions, we have to be careful about landslides, slope stability, and drainage from the construction site, so there shouldn't be any spillage of construction materials or liquids onto another site, things like that. And fragile environmental conditions in many times that in hilly areas, environmental conditions are important. Like, we have to think about the flora and fauna of that area, different species. There may be endangered species, so that we don't impact the ecology in the hilly region. In coastal areas, we all know that in the coastal areas, in marine environment, corrosion of reinforcement is a big problem, and water is saline there. So how to get fresh water, we have to think about these things. And in disaster prone areas, we have to be careful that if our site is prone to flash flood or other types of floods or waterlogging or cyclone, storm surge, etc., etc. So we have to think, we have to prepare accordingly. In particular, when we have to go for construction in adverse weather, like in rainy season, in our case, most of the time rainy season is the adverse weather. but sometimes, like in very hot and humid condition, we have to go for different types of construction activities. Or in very cold weather, although in Bangladesh we don't have that problem. But if you go to a foreign country and engage in construction activities, you should know. But this is, of course, BNBC, so we'll talk about only Bangladesh. So site layout which enables accessibility in adverse weather. So the site access should be such that even in adverse weather, there is no problem in accessing the site. Like for in our case, there should be canopies so that in rainy weather we can protect our equipment and people from rain. Adequate protected storage for weather sensitive materials and equipment. We'll see that in the storage of materials chapter, we'll see that materials are classified in 5 types. One of them is weather sensitive materials. So for example, cement is very, very sensitive to weather, like is very sensitive to humidity. We all know that. So we have to think about how to store them properly, cement, and if there are other weather sensitive materials and equipment. Protection to personnel from extreme hot or control conditions. So if the weather condition is, for example, for example, in Bangladesh in May, in the month of April or May, sometimes it's very, very hot. So what types of protections are needed for personnel, that we have to think. We have to prepare according to the activity plan. So what types of activities will be conducted during those hot seasons, very dry seasons? According to that, we'll have to take protections. Scheduling to allow maximization of our outdoor activities during fair weather conditions. So we have already mentioned that, and we are more or less, all of us are more or less familiar to this. But in many government projects, this is not possible. It is very difficult to stick to the schedule, and because of many formalities like tendering, etc., etc., and very pressing deadlines. So sometimes we have to go for construction activities during unfair weather conditions, but we should plan so that we should initially schedule so that we can conduct most of the activities in fair weather. Special design and construction provisions for activities in extreme temperature conditions like hot or cold weather concreting, staple of false work in extreme wind conditions, etc., etc. So in Bangladesh, we don't have that kind of extreme hot or extreme cold weather, but in very exceptional cases, like for example, in some parts in the North Bengal, where it is very hot in summer and somewhat very cold in winter. So during those seasons, while concreting, we have to be careful. Like in very hot conditions, sometimes we need to use ice during concreting to lower the temperature, right? And things like that. But we don't have that extreme cold there, cold weather where we need to take special care for concreting. That's very, very unlikely. And the formworks should be stable so that even in very gusty weather conditions, the formworks do not collapse. Adequate lighting for shorter days in winter or night work. I have already mentioned this. This is very important for protection of workers. Design for early enclosure. Where sometimes in the rainy season we have to enclose early. So what types of precautions that are needed? We have to think about that. Adjacent historically important structure shall be given highest care against any damage during construction process. So this is always true. So we have to be extra careful to protect historically or archaeologically important structures. Now, during construction phase, the site layout is very important. We should have a proper drawing of the site layout, and in the site layout, everything should be marked clearly, like the access and exit should be easy with proper parking, because trucks supplying materials have to be parked. So those parking areas should be properly marked, and the access and exit should be easy, in the sense that there should be separate vehicular and pedestrian access and exit. In the same access, people and vehicles should not access in the same way. There should be different access for pedestrians and vehicles. That is one thing. Another thing is the ground condition should be leveled so that the access is easy. Properly located material stores for easy handling and storage. So it is not a good practice to have a material store quite far from the construction location of construction. It should be placed in such a way that entire construction site should be within reasonable distance. Adequate stack areas for bulk construction materials, so for like aggregates, sand, stone, this type of bulk construction materials. So there should be stack areas with adequate space. Optimum location plants and equipment, batching plant. If we need a batching plant at the site, then what should be the optimum location for that? We have to design that accordingly. Layout of temporary services, water, power suppression unit, hoist, cranes, elevators, etc. All these services should be marked on the site layout. Adequate yard lighting and lighting for night shifts. So lighting design, the temporary lighting facility that will be needed at the construction site, that should be marked properly. And this is very important. Sometimes we don't take it very seriously, this lighting. We casually draw wares, and we casually place lights anywhere with uncovered wares, but that's very risky. At the construction site, there is a large percentage of the accidents is due to electrocution, and that's because of unplanned wiring at the construction site. So this lighting and other wiring and electrical facilities, that should be marked clearly at the on the site layout. Temporary buildings, site office shelter for workforce with use of non-combustible materials, including emergency medical aids. So this is important. The site office and shelter for workers that should not be built with timber or bamboo, like combustible materials. That should be built with non-combustible materials. And at the site office and workers shelter, proper emergency medical aids should be available. Roads for vehicular movement with effective drainage plan. So the roads doesn't need to be metalled or doesn't need to be paved, but it may be just ground, but properly leveled with effective drainage plan. Construction safety with emergency access and evacuations and security measures. So, for example, there should be adequate access for fire service vehicles, fire trucks. So these security and emergency measures should be there in the site layout. Fabrication years for reinforcement assembly, concrete casting and shuttering materials, etc. So we need space for stacking bulk materials. At the same time, we need space for fabrication yard. If it is a steel structure, then we need some space to weld members. If it is a concrete construction, then concrete casting. Even in for steel structure, concrete casting is required for foundation, but we need space for that, and we need space for storing shuttering materials, etc. Fencing, barricades, signage, these should be clearly marked on the site layout, where fences should be erected, where there should be barricade to separate construction site from public, and there should be adequate and proper signage for protection of both workers and public. So these should be there on a site layout plan. So as I was saying that for fire trucks, access for firefighting equipment vehicles should be there at every construction site. Access for firefighting equipment shall be provided to the construction site at the start of construction and maintained until all construction work is completed. So for the full duration of the construction, this access should be there. Free access from the street to fire hydrants or static water tanks, where available, shall be provided and maintained at all times. In Bangladesh, we don't have fire hydrants available near a construction site in most of the time. But there should be water, source of water that can be accessed in case of fire. And that source of water should be that should be easily available. During building operations, free access to permanent, temporary, or portable first aid firefighting equipment shall be maintained at all times. So like extinguisher, or for different types of fires, we use different types of fire extinguishing equipment. Like sometimes we use sand instead of water. So those should be kept in such a place which is easily accessible. In all buildings over 2 stories high, at least one stairway shall be provided in usable condition at all times. So in the construction sequence, it should be planned ahead that there should be a stairway that will be available for the workers when the building is more than 2 stories high during construction. For example, when you are constructing the third floor or fourth floor, there should be a stairway that goes up to that level. When you construct the fifth level, the stairway should be continue to the fifth level first. So it should be always available for evacuation. Now, those were related to planning. Now we'll talk a little bit about construction control. So construction control is that is more related to like the control by the authority or from the authority side. So one control the authority would require is site preparation. In any case, the client will always first want to see if you have prepared the site or not from a contractor. So bush, debris, etc. shall be removed. Temporary building so located to cause minimum fire hazard will be made of combustible materials, non-combustible materials, etc., etc. So preparing the site. So whatever you put on the site plan, site layout, you prepare the site accordingly. Then permits, storing materials on roads using public utilities, digging roads, storing explosives, affecting historical structure for the activities for which you need permits, you should acquire appropriate permit. Now, there is a idea among people that materials should not be stored on roads. That is partially true. Yes, for the convenience of public, construction materials should not be kept on roads, but sometimes we cannot avoid that. In city areas, in the construction site, we don't have enough space. So in many cases, we have to store materials on roads. We can do that. It is not that it is prohibited. We can do that, but we need to take permission for that from relevant authority. So we have to acquire that permission beforehand, before storing materials on roads. Sometimes we need to use public utilities. In that case too, we need to take permission. Sometimes it is needed to even dig roads. Again, we need permission. For demolition activities, we may need to store explosives. In that case, we have to take permission from, there is an authority in Bangladesh, I don't remember the name of that authority, who deal with the explosives. I don't remember the name of that authority. There is an authority from which you have to take permission if you want to store any kind of, not only explosive, any kind of chemicals that may explode too. So for that, in addition to FSCD, Fire Service and Civil Defense, there is another organization from which you need to take permission. And if in any case some adjacent historical structure if get affected, that is, if some kind of damage or any kind of say not structural damage, any kind of architectural issues come, in that case we have to take permission. Tests and inspections. Authority shall inspect and test if there is any complaint. So it all depends on the building official, that is the authorized officer. It is completely his discretion, his or her discretion. An authorized officer can inspect a construction site anytime, but he has to inform the owner beforehand. But he or she can inspect anytime, and an authorized officer can ask for tests if he or she thinks that is needed. That may be because of some complaint. If someone complains that some construction is not of proper standard, then the authorized officer can ask for tests. Or if the authorized officer thinks that something is wrong with the material or with the construction, then the authorized officer can ask the contractor to do some tests. Construction management. So there are many other provisions in the code regarding construction control, but I have just picked some few points. Now we'll talk about construction management. So when we think of construction management, during the construction, when construction is going on, how the contractor will manage? What are the issues that a contractor has to think, has to take consideration? One is time management. So there are deadlines for construction, right? And there are schedules and plans to meet the deadline. But in many cases, there may be some situations where there are delays, or there change in sequence of construction activities. So in those cases, the contractor has to think how the deadline will be achieved in spite of these changes. So that is time management. I think you are quite aware that now there are many different BIM tools and other tools that can be, and project management tools that can be used for this purpose. So this is well practiced, right? And then quality management. That is very important. That is not, this part is not practiced in all the construction sites, on all the constructions. Quality of a project shall be planned for all activities from inception to completion. Now, quality of a project, not only the construction of the whole project, how it is run. Like you may construct a very good building, like well designed, well constructed, very strong, architecturally very nice. But while doing that, during the construction phase, you cause environmental pollution. Is that a good? Is that a, does that reflect a good quality of the project? So when we talk about quality management, it doesn't only mean that quality of construction, quality of the structure itself. It means quality of all the aspects of a project. So, and there should be mechanisms for quality control, quality assessment, and quality control. So this is very important, and this is not only a responsibility of a single party. For management of quality of a project, the responsibility belongs to both the owner, the consultant, the contractor, all the parties involved. All of them should be aware of this quality management. Now, what is lacking in our country regarding quality management? We don't, in many construction projects, we don't follow the basic things, the minimum, like the quality control of concrete. In many projects, multi-storied buildings are being constructed without any cylinder test. We face this problem so often, quite often. So quality management is an important issue. Again, health, safety, and environment. Safety first, right? And in terms of safety, we should also think about health and environment. Various activities having impact on health, safety, and environment need to be identified with their likely effect and proposed preventive corrective actions. So that is important. So in the management process, we have to mechanisms. We should have mechanisms to ensure protection of health, safety, and environment. So in large projects or good projects, usually there is a what do you call it? There's a term, occupation health and safety manager, OSH, right? OSH manager. So you need to have a mechanism in your management for protection of health, safety, and environment. And last of all, cost management. This is very natural. All the contractors are very much aware of this, so that the cost doesn't exceed the desired cost. So I think we don't need to emphasize this. This is a natural consideration for contractors. So for management mechanisms are needed for time management, scheduling, rescheduling, etc. in an orderly, methodical way. Quality management, so you have to have a QA/QC mechanism in place, and occupation health, safety, and environment protection mechanism in place, and cost management. Now, the important things, quite elaborately in detail, this is described in the code, that is protection of public and workers. So this is quite a large section or article in the code. I have picked only a few points from there. So first of all, adjoining property. We'll talk a little bit in detail about these. So no part of any structure except signs shall project beyond the property line. So basically this is it, that nothing but only signs. Some signs can be outside of your property line. But if you need, you can take permission from the proper authority or the owner of the adjoining property to use some space from the adjoining property. Protective fences and railings. On the top right side, you can see a fence, and in the middle, you can see railings shown in red and yellow color. So there are quite in detail different relevant provisions mentioned in the code. Railings, for example, railings adjacent to footpath or excavation shall be at least 1 meter in height. So I'm just quoting these because just quoting this to show you how detailed the code is in the specifics about all these protective fences, railings, canopies, overhangs, platforms, etc. About these protective measures, the code is very, very detailed. So I request you to read this part. Those who are involved in construction, please read this chapter. There are many important information in this chapter that you'll need. And some of them are actually mandatory. So you have to practice these at the construction site. So I'm just mentioning these to show you how detailed the code is. So for railings, when adjacent to footpath or excavation, the height of the railing should be 1 meter at least. Work within 1.5 meters from the road shall be enclosed with a fence not less than 2.4 meters. So if you have to work, some construction activity goes on very close to a road, like within 1.5 meters, in that case, there should be a fence as high as 2.4 meters, not less than 2.4 meters. So that is very important. Then canopies, overhangs, and platforms. Detailed information is there in the code. At the bottom most picture, you can see a canopy that is erected over a pedestrian or walkway because of the construction going on, which you can see at the back of that picture. So protective canopy shall have a clear height. So if there is a walkway adjacent to the construction site, you have to build a protective canopy, and the clear height of the canopy should be at least 2.4 meters. And the width shall not be less than 1.2 meters wide. Even the width of the walkway is less. But if the width of the walkway is more, it should be at least as wide as the walkway. Okay, so that is important. Braced and designated to support at least 7 kilopascal. So even you have to design it, and for design, the load you should consider is at least 7 kilopascal. If you plan to have greater loads on top of it, then you have to design accordingly. But at least you have to consider 7 kilopascal of load on this canopy. Protection of utilities. Protective frame and boarding shall be built. So if there is any water pipe and you have to do some construction activity over the pipe, gas line, water line, or any other utility conduit, you have to conduct some construction activity over that line. In that case, you have to build a boarding or a protective frame so that that utility line is not damaged. Precaution to be taken to prevent material blocking in a sewer. So suppose you are doing an excavation. In that case, the excavated material, you don't dispose the excavated material in such a way that an existing sewer is blocked. So you have to be careful about that. More provisions related to protection of public and workers. Use of road and footpath. I have already mentioned this. That may be used. It is not that this is prohibited. This is not a good practice, but sometimes you cannot avoid this. So you may use road or footpath only temporarily during construction, but with permission. You have to take appropriate permission from the city authority. Like in case of Dhaka, it will be either DNCC or DSCC. Dhaka North City Corporation or Dhaka South City Corporation, shall be more than 1.5 meter away from a railway track. In no case you can do a construction activity very close to railway track. It has to be at least 1.5 meter away. A walkway shall be constructed. So When you block a road or footpath, you should build a detour, a walkway, so that pedestrians can use that. So 1 meter clear passage shall be maintained. So from the construction activity and that walkway, there should be a space of 1 meter, a distance of 1 meter. And while using the road or footpath, if the contractor, if for construction activity, if the road or footpath is damaged, then the contractor has to repair that damage. Notices and signs. Outer edge shall have red lights which shall flash continuously day and night. And this is the provision at the interface of public space and construction site. So if, for example, you might have noticed that for the construction site of the expressways, elevated expressway or MRT, so that blocks the public space on the road, right? And you will notice that there is always red lights on the fence, and that flashes when work goes on. That light, even when work doesn't go on, but that light is always flashing. The red light is supposed to flash continuously day and night, so that uh, um, public do not go into the um, construction unintentionally, or like pedestrians or vehicles can be aware that that is a construction site. Watchmen and auditory signals, again, at the interface of public space and construction site, there should be a watchman, like a security person or a guard, a watchman who will take care uh, of the safety of public, and at the same time the construction work activities are not disrupted. And the watchman should have an auditory signal when a construction activity starts nearby a public space. The watchman is supposed to use his whistle, so that public will become careful about the construction activity. Safe load, strength test of 2.5 times the superimposed live load. Okay, that is the safe load. For any of the temporary installations, like canopies, platforms, overhang, etc., boarding, etc. The safe load for that installation should be at least 2.5 times the superimposed live load that is supposed to the structure that installation is supposed to endure, or supposed to uh, uh, take. Okay, so it should be, so the factor of safety is basically 2.5 in this case. So that is the definition of safe load for construction related installations. Now, environmental protection of public and workers. So there are some issues like environment from the point of view of environmental protection. The first one is protection of existing drainage systems and utilities. We have already mentioned, I've already mentioned about this, that in no case, because of the construction activities, the existing drainage or utility lines can be blocked or damaged. So you have to take proper protection for that. Protection of soil, aquifers, and water channels. So the water bodies and the land should be protected so that we cannot pollute the water bodies and land. So safe transportation, disposal of all wastes. So there may be many types of waste that can be uh, harmful for the environment. So they should be transported safely and disposed properly. Shall not allow waste oils and other petroleum derived wastes to be used as dust suppressant. So uh, we are quite familiar with this problem of dust at a construction site. Those who commute to Gazipur, you all know you are aware of these. The dust is a major problem at a construction site. So dust should be suppressed by only water, not any. Dust can be suppressed by oil and other petroleum derived material, but that they are not good for environment, not good for health, even health of public. So water should be used as dust suppressant. Adequate sanitary facilities for workers should be there. As I said, this will come repeatedly in many different chapters in this part 7. Then protection of air quality. So measures to minimize dust blow by regular watering. I think you are all aware of the fact that Dhaka is one of the air quality of Dhaka is in the world. Top 5 worst air quality, right? So measure of air quality anyway. So the major of the major sources of that construction of all these BRT, bus rapid transit, MRT, or elevated, all these large amount of fine particles are born in air, and that's causing our air quality to drop, and which causes many lung-related health hazards. Protection from sound pollution. So there are very clear-cut provisions in the code how to minimize sound pollution. One example I'm quoting here is that noisy activities shall not be carried out from 1800 hours to 600 hours in the morning and on working days and holidays in residential areas. So this is in residential areas, noisy construction are not allowed 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning during the when we don't have daylight. During this period, activity prohibited, the code, and on holidays. But our experience is that we don't follow this. Our many developers do not follow this guideline. In many places in Dhaka, you will see that even in the at the dead of the night, construction activities are going on, piling is going on, or quite noisy activities go on. Then, as I said, we'll talk a little bit elaborately about how to protect adjoining property. So these are some points. Number one, the owner of the building, that is the building that is being constructed, under construction, the owner of the building shall preserve all adjoining structures and walls from damage. So this is the responsibility of the owner of the under construction building under construction. So it is the responsibility of the owner to protect all adjoining structures. Second, if required, the plot, building or structure shall be granted necessary permission to enter the construction site. If required, the owner of the adjoining, so you have to give access to the owner of an adjoining plot if if he or she wants to visit your plot to make his own property safe. That's his privilege. Any structure except signs shall project beyond the property line of the site. That is generally true. that everything should be within your compound, your property line, but their signs can be there outside your property line. But this is sometimes you may need to use uh, some space out of your property line. In that case, you have to take permission. Where a construction or demolition is undertaken at a level higher than the adjacent structure, the roof, roof outlets, skylights, and other roof structures of adjoining buildings shall be protected against that. So, we're talking about if your building under construction, which is under construction, is higher than the adjacent existing structure, then you have to have overhangs or things that will protect the existing structure so that something dropping from your structure doesn't damage the nearby adjacent existing structure. And the last one is that where the grade of the adjoining plot is lower than the site level, a retaining wall shall be erected. We usually do that. This is a common practice. We are very, very careful about this, because otherwise the problem that comes is very, very serious. If the foundation of the adjoining structure gets damaged, that becomes a very, very big problem. So most of the time we are very serious about this. So these are some points regarding how to protect adjoining property. But remember again that this is the responsibility of the owner of the building. Again, if you want to provide some kind of overhang that will go out of your property line to protect the adjacent structure, in that case, if the owner of the adjoining plot doesn't permit that, then it becomes the responsibility of the owner of the adjoining plot. So if something happens, then the responsibility will go to that owner. So this is also written in the code. So that was all related to constructional responsibilities and protection of public and workers, those issues. Now, before going to the safety issues during construction, we'll talk about how to store materials in a safe and proper way. So this is chapter 2 of part 7 of BNBC 2020. This is about storage, stacking, and handling practices. Okay, so number 1, each workman shall be provided with suitable equipment for his personal safety as necessary. Here we're talking about PPE, personal protective equipment. PPE, we'll talk about that later too. So for handling purposes, the workmen who will be involved in handling of materials, they should be using proper protective equipment so that they are not at risk. Then protection against fire is another important consideration while storing of materials. So combustible materials should be stored separately. 2 types of DCP extinguishers at both open and covered locations. So these are extinguishers. Different types of extinguishers should be at hand in case fire erupts. Now, as I said before, from storage point of view, materials are classified in 5 different types. One is climatically sensitive materials, so weather sensitive materials like cement. Cement is sensitive to humidity. So like cement, timber, lime, bamboo, particle board, these are weather sensitive material or climatically sensitive materials. Second type is durable materials. They are not sensitive to climatic condition or weather. They're quite durable, but still we have to follow some rules in storing these materials, like steel, brick, masonry blocks, stones, aggregates, water, etc. While talking about steel, you can argue that this is also a climatically sensitive material because steel corrodes when it comes in contact with humidity. So yes, in a way, but like the way cement becomes completely unusable if cement is in touch of humidity, steel is not in that way uh, sensitive. But yes, steel uh, is we have to protect steel from humidity. There are some measures, we'll talk about that too. But steel is classified as a durable material. Materials vulnerable to rough handling, like breakable materials, fragile materials, aluminum, fly, fly, fly ash, I think it should be fly ash, pipes, timber pole, sanitary appliances, doors, windows, floor tiles, sheets like glass sheets, cast iron. These are classified as materials vulnerable to rough handling. These are breakable or can be easily destroyed if you handle them rough. Then fourth type is inflammable or fire sensitive materials, the materials that can catch fire very easily. So these are inflammable or fire sensitive materials like plastic, rubber, paints, etc. And the last is the hazardous materials. These are materials uh, that can cause health problems or that can explode, etc. Like asbestos. As you know, asbestos is banned. But in case you need to store asbestos, what are the precautions you should take? But as a construction material, asbestos, we cannot use asbestos because asbestos is carcinogenic. It causes lung cancer. Different types of acids if you need at your construction site, any kind of acid, how to handle that, the acids, how to store acids. Explosives, like in demolition site, you may need to use explosives, how to store or how to uh, use explosives. Now, protect for these hazardous materials, there should be workers should have protective clothing and personal hygiene should be maintained. So these are the 5 different types of materials from storage point of view: climatically sensitive materials, durable materials, materials vulnerable to rough handling, inflammable or fire sensitive materials, and hazardous materials. Now, we should also think of how to uh, load or unload these materials, how to get the supplies of these materials, how to uh, put these materials in the storage house, and how to take out the materials. Like for example, you stack cement bags on top of each other, then you start using. So, for example, you stacked, uh, say, 8 bags of cement on top of each other. Then you use 4 bags. Again, you get a new supply and you get new 4 bags on top of the old 4 bags. And then you start using again, but you are not using the older 4 bags, you start using the new ones. Then the old bags will be left for a long time without use, and that may cause the old cement bags to set, to become unusable. So there are provisions in the code that says for different types of materials, not only for cement, for different types of materials, how to store them, how to use them, that is unload them or load them. While loading, you have to be careful that the old bags should be placed on top of the new bags. So they are used first. So things like that are explained in detail in the code. So now, as an example, I'll explain a little bit about how to store cement. I think those who are involved in the construction site, they know very well how to store cement bags, but there are some code provisions and we have to be aware of them, like maximum how many bags we can store, how stack. Do you know that? Many of you might know, but some of you may not be aware that in the code there are provisions that says these many bags can be stacked. So let's see the provisions. To be stored at the worksite in a building or a shed which is dry, leak-proof, and moisture-proof naturally, we cannot store cement bags open in air. We should store cement bags in an enclosed space, and usually we do not have any windows in those enclosed spaces. At least we don't open the windows. They should be always blocked so that open air doesn't go into that enclosure. But at the same time, that should be dry, leak-proof, and moisture-proof, that enclosure. So we usually store cement bags in rooms, like rooms having brick walls and floor, dry floor, not on the ground. And even within a house, the next point is that bags to be stacked on wooden planks, maintaining a minimum clearance of 200 millimeter from the floor. Suppose you have a concrete floor, but you cannot put the cement bag directly on the concrete floor. You have to put a wooden plank like that is shown in the picture on the right top of the slide. You see there are some wooden planks, a board made of wooden planks, and you can keep cement bags on this type of wooden planks, a board made of wooden planks, and the distance and the height from the floor of the wooden plank should be 200 millimeters, 8 inches, something like that. Okay, so that this is not in contact, the cement bags are not in contact with the floor. Third point is maximum height of the stack shall be 15 bags, but there is a but, I'll say that. And the width not more than 4 bags or 3 meters. So here you can see in the picture that there are 2 bags side by side, and you can make it 4. The width may be 4 bags, and you can stack 15 bags on top of each other, but only when you put the cement bags crosswise. Like here at one layer, you see that the length is in, say, X direction, and in the next layer, the longer side of the cement bag should be in the Y direction. If you put the cement bags in this fashion crosswise, then you can stack cement bags up to a height of 15 bags. Otherwise, if you put all the bags in the same direction, and if you stack them on top of each other, then you can stack at most 8 bags on top of each other if you don't put them crosswise. If you put them crosswise, only then you can put the 15 bags. In stacks, oh, that is written in the next point. In stacks more than 8 bags high, the bags shall be arranged alternate length and crosswise. So that's it. Next point is cement shall be used in the order they are received. Storage shall facilitate this requirement. As I say, that the one you receive first, you should use that first. The bag you received last, you should use that last. But if you store in such a way, the bag you receive first is at the bottom, then you will use that first, the last. Okay, so you shouldn't do that. You should store in a way so that the older bags are used first or earlier. Hooks shall not be used. This is funny. It may sound funny, but this is a fact. Sometimes people use hooks made of steel hooks or cast iron hooks, and they puncture the bag, cement bag, and draw cement bag with the hooks. This is a culture that comes from how they handle rice bags. You know, rice bags made of gunny bags. So there's no problem to use hooks to pull rice bags, and they usually don't gunny bags are like the rice, they don't spill out of the bag even if you use a hook. But in case of cement bag, if you use a hook and puncture the bag, the protection of the bag goes, it just isn't there. So it will be exposed to humidity, so you cannot do that. And the last point is workers handling cement shall put on protective hand and face coverings. So they should use gloves, protective gloves, and if possible, some kind of face cover like goggles, so that from cement grains, the workers' eyes are protected. So some kind of covering should be used. It may be face shield or eye goggles, safety goggles, etc. But we seldom see that at the construction site in Bangladesh. But at least hand gloves should be used. According to the code, both face coverings and hand gloves should be used. So these are some points related to cement storage. There are many other points in the code. Please go and read the code, in this section of the code, to have better understanding of how to store materials. And this example, the cement is a climatically sensitive material. Now, steel, as an example of durable material, so how it should be stored. Let's see what's written in the code. In the code is mentioned that reinforcement bars and structural steel sections, not only reinforcement rivers, also the structural steel sections like I sections or channel sections, etc., shall be coated with cement wash before stacking. So when you expect that your steel has to be stored for long time, in that case you may coat the steel sections or the rivers with cement wash, very lean cement wash, like percentage of cement will be like water cement ratio will be very high. It's kind of grout, but not even grout, it's cement wash. So you use a little bit of cement in water and then you spray that on top of the rebar or steel sections, so that the grains are deposited, cement grains are deposited on the steel, and that gives some kind of protection against humidity for prolonged exposure to weather. Bars of different types, sizes, and lengths and structural steel sections shall be stored separately to facilitate issues or use. That is, so that you don't confuse with 16 millimeter rebar with, say, 20 millimeter rebar, because sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish them at a construction site. So usually the next point is more important, that end of bars and sections of each type shall be painted with separate designated colors. So for 16 milli rebar, you say color red, as just shown in the picture at the bottom. Say 20 milli rebars, you color the ends with blue. And at the construction site, the workers should know the color code, which color means what. So if you need 16 millireverse, then you just pull the red ones. If you need 20 millireverse, you just draw the blue ones, like that. And it is good if you could store them. Of course, you store all the 16 millireverse at one place and all the 20 millireverse at a different place, right? Even if it is side by side, but you don't mix them, right? That's natural. So that is said here. So you store them separately and you use some color code. So that's all about steel. Then another example, but this is a durable example of another durable material, but I'm mentioning this because this is important, because many times accidents happen by falling off brick stacks on top of construction workers. So you should know the limits, how many bricks we can stack on top of each other, what is allowed in the code, that we should know. So number one, the stacks shall be 50 bricks long, not the height. In length, you may place 50 bricks, and 10 bricks high, not more than 4 bricks in width. So 50 bricks long, 4 bricks wide, and 10 bricks high. That are the limits. So we should be careful about stacking bricks. It should never exceed 10 bricks high. But quite frequently you can see at the construction site that this is not maintained. Sometimes the height of the brick stacks is quite high, and width quite high, so that they fall and cause accidents. Clear distance between adjacent stacks shall not be less than 800 millimeters. So there should be a gap between two adjacent stacks, and that gap should not be less than 800 millimeters. Bricks made of clay containing lime shall be thoroughly, so usually soak bricks in water before using. So that is a common practice. The height of the stack of blocks shall not be more than 1.2 meters. This is related to blocks, concrete blocks. So for bricks, clay bricks, the height should not exceed 10 bricks. For concrete blocks, since bricks are of standard size, right? If we put flat, we place the bricks flat, so height is 10 inches, 5 inches, right? But in case of blocks can have different sizes. So that's why it's mentioned that in meters. So the height of block stacks should not exceed 1.2 meters. Very low. You understand? The length of the stack shall not be more than 3 meters. Why? Blocks are stacked very low, not very high, like in case of bricks, because usually the strength of blocks, concrete blocks, is much less than the strength of bricks. That's why if you stack blocks quite high, there is a possibility that the blocks at the bottom of the stack may get broken. So because of that, the height limit is quite low. And once the blocks at the bottom get broken, then the whole stack becomes unstable, and that may fall on top of people or workers. So that's why the height of the block stacks is quite limited. All blocks should be water cured for 10 to 14 days and air cured for another 15 days. Thus, no blocks with less than 28 days curing shall be used. So for concrete blocks, after casting of the blocks, they must be water cured at least for 10 to 14 days, and they should not be used until 28 days. Okay, so the rest of the time they can be air cured. As an example of breakable material, we can talk about glass sheet. How glass sheets can be stored. All glass sheets shall be kept dry and stored in a covered space. So the reason the glass sheet should be kept dry is not that they are climatically sensitive, not because of that, but for the convenience of handling. So if the glass sheets are not dry, if they're wet, it's very difficult to handle them, to take from one place to another. To carry them by hand, it becomes difficult. So that's why they should be kept dry and should not be stored in open air. Glass sheets shall be lifted and stored upright on their long edges, both for storing and for lifting. They should not be lifted flat or stored flat. They should be stored and lifted upright. Like in the picture, you can see the glass sheets are almost upright. It cannot be placed exactly upright because in the next point it is written and put into stacks. Oh no, next point, they shall be supported at 2 points. No, not that one. The last point, the bottom of each stack shall be about 25 millimeter clear from the base of the wall and other supports against which the stack rests. In the picture, you can see that the stacks of glass sheets, they are resting on a kind of frame. And at the bottom of the frame, from the frame, the bottom of the glass sheet is kept somewhat at a distance, and that distance should be at least 25 millimeters clear, about 1 inch. So we cannot put them just upright. We have to put some space from the bottom of the support to the bottom of the glass sheet. So it is almost upright, but not exactly upright, number one. And then how many sheets we can put in a single stack, not more than 25 sheets. It also depends on the thickness of the glass sheet. If the glass sheet is too thick, naturally you don't put so many glass sheets in a stack. And the third point was they shall be supported at 2 points at about 300 millimeters from each end by fillet of wood, or wood. It can be wood or yeah, usually wood, because in case of some pressure comes, the wood becomes dented without breaking the glass. But if it is like very hard material, then the material doesn't get dented under pressure. The glass can be broken easily. So here we see that they're stacked against something. Maybe they're wood planks with these frames. I don't know, maybe. But usually it's better to use some wood support to stack the glass sheets. So this is an example of how to store glass sheets. There are many other points written in the code about how to store and use glass sheets, how to transport them, etc., etc. So I have just quoted some few points from there. So we talked about how to store cement, how to store steel sections or rebars, how to store bricks or blocks, how to store glass sheets. And now this is an example of inflammable materials, paints, varnishes, etc. They are inflammable. They can easily catch fire. Paints, varnishes, lacquers, thinners, and other inflammable materials shall be kept in properly sealed or closed containers. So naturally, you just don't put them in a drum without any lid, not like that. They will be usually in sealed and closed containers. The containers shall be kept in a well-ventilated location, free from excessive heat, smoke, sparks, or flame. This is absolutely essential. That they should not be kept in locations like very congested locations where heat may there may be heat gain because of congestion, and the place where paints and varnishes are kept, that should be absolutely free from any kind of smoke or flame. Um, there are many examples of fire that broke out because from the storage of paints. This is very common because paint is very inflammable. The floor of the paint store shall have 100 millimeter thick loose sand on it. So uh, the floor, there should be sand, a layer of sand on the floor. Temporary electrical wiring and fittings shall not be installed in the paint store. This is very important. There shall be no wiring for any purpose, not for lighting, not for uh, electric fans or air conditioner, etc. There should be no wiring inside the room where you store paints or varnishes or other inflammable materials. Okay. For lighting purposes, you can use some emergency light or torch or things like that, but there should not be any wiring inside that room. Sources of ignition, such as open flame and exposed heating elements, shall not be permitted in paint store, nor shall smoking be allowed there. So you do not allow someone to use some stove or some cooking device nearby a paint store where you're storing paints. You know about Nimtoli incident, where there were uh, wedding party cooking for the wedding party very close to a chemical go down, which was illegally stored. Those chemicals were illegally stored in residential areas. You know about that accident. That was very tragic. So because of that, you cannot have any source of heating nearby a paint store, like a place where it's storing paints. And that should be free of smoking. So that should be absolutely restricted zone. For no smoking will be allowed. So these are very important things from fire protection point of view when you store paints, varnishes, etc. We seldom store acids in a construction site, but for some reason, if there is a chemical factory or some reason, or if some construction needs any kind of acids or corrosive materials, like sometimes you may need bases too, which is also harmful. So to store this type of material, which are harmful for your health or like skin, physically harmful, how to store them? Store acids and bases in separate cabinets. Naturally, you don't store acids and bases side by side because you know they react. Or you keep acids and solvents in different cabinets. Those chemicals which can react with each other, you store them separately. Label shelves for quick chemical identification. For example, if you don't label an acid container that this is acid, this is very dangerous. You can use that liquid for some other purpose which can uh, harm people. So proper labeling is very important. Make sure that incompatibilities are not are not stored on the same shelf. As I said, those which can react with each other, you don't keep them you keep them separately. Keep same shaped bottles on the same shelf to conserve shelf space. This is not just only for conservation of shelf space. This is also convenient to handle. Never store chemical containers anywhere except in designated cabinets. So, like you're using some acid container having acids, and you put that back from the same shelf where from designated for acids. You don't put that back in somewhere else where people can without noticing that this is acid, even if it is labeled. From habit, he or she can take that from a different shelf, assuming that this is a different chemical. So that is dangerous. That's why you should put chemicals back in the right place. So these are some, there are many, many other points in the code. I have just quoted some of a few points as examples. So this is an example for hazardous material. So so there are provisions how to keep explosives, how to keep like other different types of materials. So almost this is very long list, exhaustive list, where in the code for different types of materials, how to store them, how to handle them, how to load them, how to unload them. All the provisions are written in chapter 2 of part 7. So I'd suggest you to read that. That will be very useful for proper construction management. So we have talked about responsibilities of different parties during construction and how to protect public and workers. Then we talked about how to store different types of materials. Now let's talk about what are the safety precautions or provisions that we should follow during construction. This is chapter 3 of part 7 of building BNBC 2020. So you should have a mechanism in place, a procedure, standard procedure, so that safety is maintained at site. Number one, you all know the phrase safety first. So safety is the first and foremost consideration that you should think about at a construction site, planning a construction, managing a construction. So, and who are at risk? Most at risk are the workers. And for the safety of the workers, first thing you need are the safety equipment or PPE, personal protective equipment. So I'll show one picture where I'll show different types of PPEs. The most common are helmets, and as you know, the helmets for construction workers is different from a helmet you use while biking, right? Well, you're riding a motorbike, you use one kind of helmet, but for construction site, use a different type of helmet. And there is a standard for the construction helmets. It is BDS, Bangladesh standard 1265 and 1266. So helmets should be manufactured and tested according to these standards, and only those helmets are allowed at construction site. Safety goggles to protect your eyes, and there is a standard for that too, BDS, Bangladesh standard 1360. Proper protective equipment like gloves, safety boots, aprons, hand shields, face shields. So for different activities, you may need different types of protective equipment. Now, site precautions during the erection of tall buildings. Nylon net shall be put around the building periphery, 3 meters to 4 meters. Below the working level, just below the working level. So, for example, you are working in the 5th level, and just 3 meters or 4 meters below, you put some cantilevers made of, say, channel sections or some, yeah, or even timbers. Using timbers, you can put some cantilevers and put nylon sheet, nylon net around that structure, so that uh, different types of materials, like small materials, do not fall onto public or nearby structures, like while you are concreting, so that some concrete or stone do not fall on a nearby structure and people adjacent to that structure. So that's why you need this protection. Site amenities, again, toilet facilities shall be provided at all construction sites. Washing facilities, drinking water shall be provided. This is very, very important. It is repeatedly mentioned in the code. Toilet facilities for the workers, washing facilities, and drinking water. Now let's see some PPE, like hard hat or helmet, according to BDS 1265 or 1260 and 1266. Safety goggles, like when you are welding, you need this type of goggles, or when you are using some granular material, you use this goggle. Nose mask, when you are using some granular material, to you use mask, face mask or nose mask. Ear muff or plug to protect your ear in noisy, when you are, say, cutting a river, that is very, very noisy, and that can harm your eardrum. So you have to use ear muff or plug. And reflecting jacket, when there is chance at the interface of public, you use this kind of jacket for visibility, so that people can see you from afar. Safety belt to use with the harness. When you work at a height, you use this safety belt and use harness to protect yourself from falling. Hand gloves, use hand gloves so that your fingers don't get hurt by from falling something on your fingers, or like so that usually at the tip of the gloves there are very hard caps, so that your fingertips do not get hurt. Face shield, while welding you use face shield. Safety shoes, you should always, the workers should always wear safety shoes at a construction site. This is very important. And on the right you can see different components of a safety shoe, like toe cap. This is very important. Steel or plastic, but very hard toe cap should be there, so that if something falls on your feet, your toe don't get injured, don't get hurt. So that's why toe cap is very important. Cushion heel is very important. And most important is slip resistance of the safety boots, so that in on wet surfaces you don't slip, things like that. And padded collar is also important, so that if something comes from the side, that don't injure your feet. So these are some PPE, personal protective equipment, and a little bit in detail what a safety boot looks like. And for the helmet, we should always check if the helmet is in good condition, like some what do you call it, shock absorbing material should be on the top of your just above your head. There should be some shock absorbing material. And the chain strap that you pull at the back and tighten to properly place the helmet on top of your head. So that chain strap should be okay. And before using, you should always use that chain strap to tightly put the helmet on top of your head. Sorry, that is not the chain strap. That is called harness. Sorry, the part of your helmet that you tighten to uh, place the helmet on your head properly, that part is called harness. In the second picture, is shown with a red arrow. So that's the harness. So you should tighten the screw there. And the third is you put the chain strap below your chin. You pull the chain strap and bring it below your chin, and around both ears. So that is the correct way of wearing a helmet. Just showing, because sometimes we don't follow all these. And so those were about PPE, different types of PPEs. Now, for different types of construction activity, we need different types of precautions. For excavation and foundation work, for pile rig, we need a different types of precautions. For construction of walls, floors, concrete work, formwork, scaffolding, we need another different sets of precautions. For erection operations like erection of steel structures, electrification equipment and operations. As I said, electrocution is a very common accident at construction sites, so we have to take precautions. Construction, different types of construction hazards, and for high-rise buildings, we have to have different sets of precautionary measures. For excavation and foundation work, this is a very, very long chapter. So there are many provisions for each of these activities. Uh, I'll just quote some examples. Like for excavation and foundation work, excavation machinery shall be kept away from the trenches by a distance of at least equal to the depth of trench to a maximum of 6 meters. So they should be kept at a distance so that the excavation machinery doesn't cause any paving of the slope. Paving, what do you call it? So caving of the slope. Sorry, caving of the slope, caving of the sidewall of excavation. Excavated materials shall be kept away from the edges of the trench. Again, for the same reason, you should not put all the excavated material on the side, on the edge of the trench. You first place them on the edge of the trench, but you should immediately remove the materials from the edge of the trench. Groundwater, the water shall be drawn away from the excavation. So sometimes you may need to use pumps to draw the groundwater away from the excavation, the trench. Ground conditions, adequate precautions against quicksand, loose fields, etc. shall be taken to protect the workmen so that the ground doesn't settle suddenly. So for that, you need to take protection. Overhang shall be supported by props. If there are some overhangs above the trench, they should be supported by props. Blast and vibrations and analysis of the stability of slopes shall be carried out. Sorry, that's related to overhang. That's not related to blast and vibration. But in case of blast and vibration, you should take extra measures, and we'll discuss about that when we'll talk about demolition. Health hazard, mechanical ventilation shall be provided if there is gas and fume. If you work very deep underground, there may be lack of oxygen, and that may cause difficulty in breathing. So you provide mechanical ventilation, so you provide oxygen artificially. but you have to be careful that that may increase the chance of fire. So like you have to be very careful so that any spark or any kind of flame doesn't cause fire when you have artificial mechanical ventilation uh, underground. Safety of materials. Materials shall be inspected by the engineer in charge. So all the materials should be inspected by the engineer charge is basically the supervisor at site. Piling and deep foundations supervised by a competent geotechnical engineer. This is very important. So all the piling and deep foundation works must be supervised by not only a supervisor, also by a geotechnical engineer. And in the code, the definition of geotechnical is given. What is the definition of a geotechnical engineer? Uh, Someone who has got a master's degree in geotechnical engineering, or someone who has quite a long experience. I don't remember exactly how many years, but it's given there. So someone who has got quite a long experience in this discipline of engineering. So piling and deep foundations must be supervised by a geotechnical engineer, not only by a supervisor. Working in compressed air, so 0.3 meter cube of fresh air per minute per person is required when there is lack of oxygen in, when you have to have artificial ventilation or you should pump oxygen, then this is the rate you should uh, give oxygen for one person. Adjoining properties and service lines. So if there are structures, adjoining structures, if there is any chance of damage of those structures due to some construction activity, like for example, like precast piling. If in your construction methodology, if you have precast pile and you have to hammer that pile, uh, you are placing the pile by hammering as opposed to push pile. So if you use hammers to insert the precast piles, in that case you have to be very careful about other old structures adjoining your site. For example, unreinforced masonry construction is very vulnerable for this type of construction activity. If you have a brick building beside your site, and if you are hammering piles, precast piles, you can be sure that there will be damages in the brick building. So you have to take precautions for that. You can monitor. You can monitor, or for example, suppose for retaining walls, not for shore piles, where you are excavating and you are placing shore piles, there may be some elastic deformation of the shore pile, even if you have like bracings, but still you can have some elastic deformation. So when you a little bit of deformation, and that can cause problem in the brick walls of the adjoining structure. So suppose you can have some cracks in the brick walls, like infill walls in an adjoining structure, but those may not cause any structural problem, but you should monitor them. That if there is any crack in the concrete, any concrete member, then you have to take measures. Okay, so monitoring of adjoining properties may be necessary. Like pile rigs, sometimes accidents happen at while boring piles with these type of pile rigs. So on the picture at the top, you can see very traditional type of pile rig, manual type, and at the bottom you can see some automatic pile rig. for board piles and for push piles, a little different type of pile rig is used. Erection of pile rig. The frame of the rigs shall be structurally safe for all anticipated dead, live, and wind loads. So even for wind loads, dead loads, and live loads, you have to be careful that structurally they should be safe. Operation of pile rig. Access to working platforms and top of pulley shall be provided by ladders in the manual type. At the top you have a pulley, and you should have some access by ladder. You can see the rig, they have some steps, so using those steps one can go up to the pulley. Working platforms shall be protected from wind and rain. Piles shall be prepared at a distance. For precast piles, the piles should not be cast very near to the rigs. Because of hammering and other disturbances, the casting will not be proper. So there should be a distance from casting yard of precast piles and the pile rigs. And that distance should be at least equal to twice the length of the longest pile from the pile driver. Inspection and test. Pile driving equipment shall be inspected by engineer at regular intervals not exceeding 3 months. So every 3 months they should be inspected. So these are few examples. There are many other professions like this. Construction of walls. The scaffolding for wall construction. The scaffold has to be checked after every 15 days in rainy season and 30 days in dry season. So the scaffold should be supervised. Then ladders. Rails of ladders shall extend at least 1 meter above the landing. Rails. Some ladders may have rails, and so that like you can hold the rails. The sides of the ladders that you hold, those are the rails, like, and the rails must be extended at least 1 meter above the landing. You cannot put the ladder just on the edge of a landing. So there is a risk that the ladder may slip and fall off from the edge of the landing. So it must be extended. I mean, you should put the ladder in such a way that from the edge of the landing there is still ladder extended from the edge. A lean-to ladder shall have a maximum angle of 75 degrees with the horizontal. So you can see in the picture, this type of ladder is a lean-to ladder type of ladder. The angle, maximum angle can be 75 degrees. You cannot put a ladder in 80 degrees, just like almost upright. So the maximum angle can be 75 degrees. As user shall place his feet near the ends of the rungs rather than near the middle of the rungs. The rungs are the steps of a ladder. So you can see in the picture, your feet should be at the side near the rails, not in the middle of the steps, not in the middle of the rungs, because these are simply supported like planks, or these are simply supported. Then if you put your steps in the middle, the moment will be maximum. There will be more risk of breaking the rungs. So if you put the feet at the near the rails, that is more stable. And face the ladder when using it. So you always face toward the ladder when climbing up or climbing down. You never, even when you are climbing down, you never face opposite to the ladder. You should always face toward the ladder. That is the standard practice. And leaning more than 300 millimeters from the side shall not be allowed. So in the picture you can see the unsafe practice of, suppose there is a window or something you have to clean, and that is a little bit away from your ladder, but you are never allowed to lean that much. You can not lean more than 300 millimeters, like 1 foot. So you can never lean more than 1 foot or 300 millimeters from the side of the ladder. So in this case, you should climb down, you should take your ladder and place it again near that window, and then climb up again, so that you don't need to lean that much. So that is the standard practice. So I have quoted only a small portion from the code regarding ladders. There are many more provisions. So you can see the code is so detailed about construction safety, safe practices in construction. Opening in walls. Wall opening from which there is a vertical drop of more than 1200 millimeter shall be guarded by barriers. So if there is an opening in a wall, and at the side of the opening, if there is a vertical drop, that is an open space, if someone falls from that opening, he will fall to a height of about 1200 millimeters, so 1.2 meters, not that high, but still that should be guarded by barriers. There should be some kind of barrier. Projection from walls. Formwork provided for horizontal projections shall not be removed till protection against overturning are constructed. So for horizontal projections, like overhangs, like something cantilever, so you have formwork for that, and that formwork, like props, you cannot remove them until you make sure that they will not overturn. Okay, so you have to place the formwork until you make sure that those temporary overhangs like cantilevers do not overturn. Common hazards during walling. Overhead protection against the falling materials shall be provided. As I said, that there should be a nylon net surrounding the building near to the level where construction is going on, so that some falling material do not cause problem in the nearby adjacent places. So these are the issues that you should be careful while constructing a wall. So there are some interesting provisions. Now, construction of floors. Use of sheets. Joints in corrugated galvanized iron sheets are kept secured. So you just do not put some what we call tin sheets, the CGA sheet, corrugated galvanized iron sheet. You do not use overlapping. You make sure that they are secured. The overlaps are secure. The joints are secure. Platforms, working platform required according to the type of roof shall be provided. Depending on the type of roof, while constructing the roof, like while laying the, while making the formwork, shuttering, while placing the shuttering for the roof, there should be a working platform. Flat roof, the formwork shall be frequently inspected for defects. Enough walking platforms shall be provided in the reinforcement area. It is usually done in Bangladesh. There are walking platforms in the reinforcement area so that you walk and see the reinforcement. This is a common practice. Openings and holes. Every temporary floor opening shall either have a railing of at least 900 millimeter height or shall be constantly attended. So if there is an opening in a floor, so there is a risk of falling, right? So either you place a railing with 900 millimeter height, like 3 feet height, or you keep someone there to constantly attend so that he can give warning if someone comes near that opening. So these are some provisions related to construction of work of floors. Now, for concrete work, many provisions are there. I'm quoting just a few. Like for pre-stressed concrete, no person shall stand in line with the tensioning elements and jacking equipment during the tensioning operation. So if the cable breaks, then the cable is it is short. It is thrown very strongly from the jacking equipment. So if someone is in line while tensioning, this is very risky. Also, no one shall be directly over the jacking equipment when deflection is done. Deflection is done. Sorry, maybe something is wrong here. No one shall be directly over the near the jacking equipment. No one should be there. I don't know what is meant by deflection. Sorry, I have to check. Workmen shall be prevented from working behind the jacks when the tensioning operation is in progress by putting signs, barriers, or protective shields. Okay, so here where jacking is operation is going on, you have to take protection so that in any case of accidents, people don't get injured. Concrete mixers, all gears, chains, and rollers of mixer plants shall be guarded. All cables, clamps, hooks, wire ropes, gears, clutches, etc. of the mixer shall be checked and serviced once a week. So these are some precautions you have to take. So you just don't leave these small things at stray, right? At a construction site. You always take record of them and put them in place. Concrete trucks and buckets. A reasonably smooth traffic surface shall be provided for concrete trucks. Closing and locking of the exit door of the concrete bucket shall always be checked so that it doesn't accidentally get open, the concrete bucket. That can cause a big accident. So these are some precautionary measures that you should take during concrete work. There are many more. I'm just giving some examples. Formwork and scaffold. Scaffolding and centering materials, horizontal and inclined bracings shall be provided for posts higher than 3 meters. We know that usually we have inclined bracings and horizontal bracings for scaffolding and for centering materials, like props. Spans of beam bottoms shall be supported by posts at most 1 meter apart. If steel is used, so after the spacing is usually 1 meter. All scaffolding exceeding 20 meters or 6 stories in height shall be constructed of non-combustible or fire retardant materials. This is important. We cannot use bamboo props or timber props for working above 6-story height. For buildings above 6 stories, we cannot use bamboo props. This is important. We have to use steel props. Formwork for concrete in case of removal of, you know why? This is actually from fire protection point of view. If you use combustible material and if there is a fire, it is very difficult to evacuate people from above 6 stories. So now our fire service civil defense has some ladders quite high, but it is usually assumed that it is very difficult to evacuate people from 6 stories or above. That's why we should not use combustible material for propping. Formwork for concrete. In case of removal of roof shuttering, staging has to be provided below the roof. Usually it is done. Load capacity. Weight of wet concrete 20 kilonewton per meter cube. This is the standard unit weight of wet concrete when you design scaffolding formworks. For the design purpose, you calculate load, and you should consider the load of wet concrete as 20 kilonewton per meter cube. Bamboos for vertical support shall not be less than 75 millimeter in diameter. This is important. Sometimes we see in the field that small diameter bamboos are used for propping. That is prohibited. The bamboo should be quite having big diameter, not less than 75 millimeters. Timber post. Timber post shall be used in supporting formwork up to a height of 6 meters. So if some staging is above 6 meters, the height of the staging, you cannot use timber post as propping. Steel centering, struts and diagonal braces shall be in proper position and secured. For steel centering, you should use braces, diagonal braces or struts. Erecting operations, this is very critical because many accidents happen during erection. Erection and hoisting. Ropes in operation shall not be touched. The ropes of the winch and other, for erection purposes, the ropes that are used, you should not touch them because that can hurt you. The ropes shall be chemically treated to resist dew and rotting. They shall not be tied beyond the reach of safety belts complying to BDS 1359. So in BDS 1359 is actually regarding safety belts. How to use the safety belts is there in BDS 1359. Small articles, bolt baskets and similar containers with handles shall be provided on floats or scaffolds where small materials such as bolts and drift pins are used. So you keep the bolts and these small articles, small things in a basket, in a bucket with a lid preferably, so that they don't fall. Hoist protection. A material hoist shall not be used to transport workers. Temporary elevators shall be installed if necessary. So using the same hoist, you don't transport people and material. For materials, you use a separate hoist. For people, you use temporary elevators. Lifting gear. Lifting gears must be tested and examined by a competent person. Cranes. The safe working load shall be clearly shown on the crane. Cranes shall not be operated in proximity to a live overhead power line. No person under the age of 29 years shall be allowed to operate. So crane operator, the legal age of a crane operator is 21, not 18. You can see the picture on the right side that a crane is overturned. And this is an accident. It happens when you try to move a crane when it is unfolded. You should never move a crane when it is unfolded. You should fold it down and then you can move the vehicle of the crane. Electrification equipment and operations, wiring system, no scaffolding, ladder, working platform, gangway, runway, etc. within 3 meters of an uninsulated live electric wire. So if you use temporarily, if you use uninsulated live electric wire, so these things like scaffolding, ladder, usually they can be made of steel. They should be away at least 3 meters away from a live wire. So etc. etc. The main switchboard shall be located in an easily accessible and prominent place. So the main switchboard, in case of an accident, so that worker can access the switchboard very fast and turn off the switch, so that it should be accessible and in a prominent place. And carbon dioxide extinguisher, CO2 extinguisher should be available, etc. Dry powder extinguisher should be, DPC extinguisher should be available, etc. And there are many other clauses. Please read the code there. This is quite interesting for a proper construction manager. These are very, very important. I'll just skip this one. For construction hazard, you should be aware of fire hazard, health hazard, skin hazard, noise hazard. So you should use protective equipment to protect your skin, to protect your health. Noise hazard. So for levels up to 110 decibels, properly fitted earplugs shall be provided. Exceeding 120 decibel, noise protection helmets shall be provided. So you can use earplugs if the noise is up to the level of 110 decibel. If it exceeds 120 decibel, then only earplugs will not work. You should use helmets having mufflers. They call it mufflers, which protects your eardrum from noise. So for fire hazard, at the construction site, this is taken very, very seriously. So there should be water storage facility where from in case of fire you can use for extinguishing fire. There should be separate exit stairway. I think I have mentioned most of these in previous slides. Now, I have run out of my time, but still I want to take a few more minutes to introduce these topics to you, that you know that they're in the code. I know that there are many engineers who are not aware that there are some chapters related to construction in the code. Most of the engineers, many engineers, think that the building code is for the designers only. But there is a separate part 7, dedicatedly for construction, issues related to construction. Demolition is a very, very critical activity from safety point of view. So there are many issues, how you should plan, what are the sequences you should follow. If you use blasting and use explosives, what are the safety provisions you should follow, how you should lower, remove, and dispose materials. This is important. This was there in our previous code in BNBC 2006, but still we had accident like Ranks building accident. You know, Ranks building, a 22-story building that was being demolished. Oh, that was in the year 2006 probably. But in the 1993 version of the code, uh, these chapters were there. That building collapsed during demolition activity just because they didn't follow the proper standard uh, procedure for demolition. They did not dispose of the debris material. They stacked all the debris material on the floor where demolition activities were going on, and that caused that exceeded the capacity of the slab. That was flat slab floor, and that exceeded the punching shear capacity of the floor because of the vibration and stack of the debris material, and that caused collapse of the slabs because they didn't follow what was there in the code. So you have to plan properly, you have to protect the adjoining property, you have to provide shed in the sidewalk, provide canopy, things that I have already mentioned. From the demolition side, depending on where the sidewalk is, or where the public property is, or where the distance from the adjoining property, depending on the distance, different types of protective measures should be taken, and there are 5 types: type A, B, C, D, and E. So depending on the distance, different types of protective measures should be taken, and that is given in a table in the code. How to demolish walls, how to demolish floor, how to demolish a truss, a heavy beam, an arch. These are all there in the code. cast in situ RC members, how to demolish them, what should be the sequence? First, you should demolish the partition walls, load-bearing member components. Then you should remove the slab. Then you should attach the beams with ties, and then you expose the reinforcement from the sides of the beam near the supports. Then you cut the reinforcement. So you hang the beam with the ties. You lower the beam very slowly on ground or on the floor, and you dispose the beam from the floor. Once the beams are demolished, then you tie wear ropes on the top of the columns, and you use a winch with the wire guy ropes, and you cut off the base of the column, you expose the base of the column, you cut the reinforcement there gradually, and you pull with the winch, you pull the column down. You bend the reinforcement at the bottom, and then you cut the reinforcement, and then you remove the column. So these are the sequence that are usually followed when you manually demolish an RC structure. If there are shear walls, you cut them into strips first, and then, like the column, you pull from the top. So like if the height of the shear wall is like 10 feet, you groove at the level of 5 feet, you gradually cut one layer of reinforcement, and you pull with a guy rope, you pull the top, you bend the other reinforcements at the level of 5 feet, you cut them. So you take out that piece of the shear wall, and then you go down. So these are the sequences that are followed during demolition activities. Sometimes we use mechanical devices like weight balls or power shovels, like bulldozers. We usually call bulldozers or power shovels. And but for buildings above 25 meters of height, they are not allowed. These mechanical devices are not allowed. Only buildings of height less than 25 meters, we can use mechanical devices. So there are many other issues. I'll just keep for the time being. I think I have mentioned most of them. For blasting operations, we have some. One thing is very important: shot firer. One person who is experienced in shot firing is called shot firer, competent shot firer. They should be certified, and all other personnel should be under the shot firer. There should be a chain of command, and at the top of the chain of command, there should be the shot firer, competent shot firer. This is very important in blasting operations. So you can see there should be chutes, this kind of chutes, and all the debris should be disposed of through these type of chutes, so that you don't mass, or you don't make a stack of debris on top of the floor slab. Use chutes, and you remove the debris through the chutes. So after the demolition activity, you should clear all the rubbish and water, and you should reconnect all the utility, or you should cap the utility connections like gas connection, water connection. They should be properly capped. So that is called regularization of the plot. Now, I will skip this part, evaluation and acceptance of concrete, because I think I have mentioned this when I had a webinar. I had a webinar on concrete. There I mentioned how many cylinders tests should be done, what is the acceptance criteria, if it fails, then what should be done, the load tests, etc. I think I have mentioned them in my webinar on concrete, so I'll skip them. but this is related to quality control. So acceptance criteria for load test. Enforcement, the first one is that for construction supervision for different types of buildings, category 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the height of the building, if it is 2-storied or 5-storied or 6 or 10-storied or above, based on that and the floor area, total floor area, based on that the buildings are categorized in 4 categories, and depending on the category, the qualification needed or the experience needed for the construction supervisor is given in a table in the code. For building demolition also, for supervisor of the building demolition, the required experience and qualification is given. So this is one thing regarding enforcement, and all works relating to a building or structure regulated by provisions of this code for which permits are required shall be subject to inspection by the building official, that is the authorized officer. Modalities and frequency of such inspections shall conform to the requirements put forward by the approving authority. So this is a gray area in our code. In the building code, there is no mention about frequency of inspection, when the inspectors will only inspection. In the Imarat Nirman Vidhimala, it is written that while your building is at the plinth level, the inspector will inspect if the setbacks are properly maintained, etc. So for that reason, there will be an inspection of at the plinth level, but after that, at every floor level, there should be an inspection or not. It is not written in the code or not in the Imarat Nirman Vidhimala. So this is a gray area. So in the S9 project by Raju, ICC is going to suggest the frequency of inspections for Raju. Demolition, the enforcement of demolition. So before conducting the demolition, all utility service providers will be notified that there will be a demolition at a particular building, so they will remove their equipment appurtenances, etc. Demolition work should be done under the supervision of a demolition expert. And as I said, the authorized officer can ask for tests for proof of compliance. So that is the right of the authorized officer. He can require, that is, he can ask for specific tests from the owner. So these were the enforcement related provisions. So what I tried to do in this webinar is that I wanted to introduce you to the part 7 of the building code, because I found that many engineers even are not aware that there is a part in the code which deals with construction activities, construction safety, etc. So I just wanted to introduce you to some giving some examples of different provisions. But if you want to know exactly or completely all the provisions, you have no other choice but to read the specific part of the code. So that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you for attending this webinar. If you have questions, please put the questions down in the chat box or question answer box. I will try to answer your questions. One question, dear sir, sometimes the steel rebar gets corroded very fast, specifically during rainy season. What type of measures we may take to use the steel rebar for construction? So while storing, you can spray some cement wash on the rebar so that they don't corrode that fast. Secondly, once they are corroded, you should use wire brush to clean off the corroded material, and then you can use them. If they are corroded like a lot, then you should scrap those materials. So now we are using ready-mix concrete for this. What is the rule? What are the rules and regulations against RMC suppliers when they will not supply quality concrete as per requirement? So in the code, there is no such specific regulation. It's more related to contractual obligations. So you should have a proper contract with your supplier, ready-mix concrete supplier. If they violate the contract, then you can take legal action against them, what is contractually permitted. So I think this is not a matter of code provisions, rather this is a matter of contractual obligation. So which organization is responsible to enforce and cross-check whether this part of the code is followed or not? What is the least penalty if the code is violated? Which department has the magistracy power to make people obey by penitent? I discussed these issues in my webinar on Act, the Building Construction Act, and the rules, building construction rules. There I discussed these issues. In the code, a building regulatory authority is proposed, BBRA is proposed in the code. So once BBRA is established, it will be the under the jurisdiction of BBRA, but the structure is such that BBRA will conduct its operations through Rajuk and other development authorities. So actually it is the development authorities, and they are responsible to check these, and that's why they have inspectors too. So basically the development authorities, they are responsible. So there are many other questions that today, I'm sorry I took too much time. I didn't notice that I'm taking too much time. So I will try to answer these questions in future. So thank you so much, and sorry for taking so much time. That's it. We then conclude this webinar.